Welcome to the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. I'm your host, Yaakov Katz. On today's episode, we're focusing on the dilemma gripping Israel's President Isaac Herzog. Should he pardon Benjamin Netanyahu, or should he not? Let's remember that a presidential pardon is something that is meant to offer mercy, closure, and even national healing. But when the person seeking it is the country's longest-serving prime minister, who's currently on trial for corruption, the question becomes far bigger than the fate of one man. It is a moment that could redefine Israeli democracy itself. On the one side, there are those, including myself, who argue that the trial has paralyzed the political system. It's fueled division. It's prevented stable leadership at a time of war and regional upheaval. We believe that a pardon, however imperfect and wrong it might be the only way to reset the political system and for the country to move forward. But I also hear the other side. And there are those who argue that a pardon, and they actually warn that a pardoning of the prime minister before he gets a verdict, of Netanyahu, who is one of the people who is responsible for the division, the polarization, and of course October 7th, sends a dangerous message. It's that powerful leaders are not bound by the same rules as ordinary citizens, and that accountability can be negotiated when there's enough pressure. In the conversation that I have today with Gil Troy and Shmuel Rosner of JPPI, we explore all of these questions, but we also look at another one. For example, why does President Donald Trump care about whether Netanyahu gets a pardon or does not? Why is he taking such a personal interest on the issue? And could Netanyahu's pardon actually play a role in U.S.-Israel relations and broader regional diplomacy? We ask what a pardon would actually mean for Israel. Would it heal the country's internal divisions, or would it deepen them? Would it stabilize the political system, or further erode public trust in the rule of law? At the center of all of this is Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, who is facing perhaps the most consequential decision of his presidency. What does Israel need more right now? Justice and a trial to continue, or a pardon and potential political stability? That is his dilemma and all of our dilemma today. Let's begin. Shmuel and Gil, it's great to have you both back on the podcast. It's been a while since we've gathered here, so I appreciate the time. And the topic that I think we should really start with is the one that's really on a lot of people's minds over the last, I would say now, just about a week or so, ever since Prime Minister Netanyahu dropped the bombshell, or sent an email, more accurately, his legal staff did, that to the president asking officially for a pardon. And the question really comes down to, what will Isaac Herzog do? Because I'm not going to get into all of the legal conversations. Does he have the authority? Does he not have the mandate? Can he do it legally? Can he not do it legally? It seems that he can, and that it is a wide enough jurisdiction when it comes to issuing pardons, and that this, even though the case is already moving forward and the trial is already well underway, he would still have the ability to be able to potentially pardon the prime minister. But the question then comes down to, okay, something I think is more of a values-based conversation, right? And a future-looking, what do we want to see happen to the state of Israel conversation. And that's what the pardon is about, because this isn't just pardoning another individual. Obviously, this is pardoning the prime minister, and this is pardoning an individual who, whether you like him or you don't, it's hard to say that he's not responsible for a lot of the division and a lot of the polarization and the situation that we find ourselves in, let alone October 7th, which is a whole other conversation that we might get a bit into. But first, before we dive into what should happen and what shouldn't happen, Shmuel, tell us, if you can, where are the Israeli people on this, right? There's been a lot of polling that's come out, a lot of different, the TV stations. We've done some polling also here at JPPI. I mean, where do we see most Israelis on this question?
Well, I can say that we just conducted a very recent poll in which we found out that views of the public did not change after the request by the Prime Minister. So what we see now, or the public view on this issue, is pretty much preconditioned on the public's view on Netanyahu himself, the coalition, the legal situation, approval and disapproval of the Supreme Court and the legal system. There are many factors that go into the considerations that Israelis have in mind when they think about the request for pardon. By and large, I would say this: the Israeli public is aware of the fact that the trial is a serious disruption. People do understand that to have a prime minister stand on the witness stand 3 times a week, having to prepare for testimony.
Even though it never is 3 times a week, because he gets,
okay,
he gets off. He gets,
a prime minister's job. A prime minister's job in Israel is a demanding job. This is not a leisurely occupation that people can do alongside other things. So people understand that to have the prime minister preoccupied with his trial when he needs to do other things is something that is, does not benefit.
It's a huge distraction, especially considering the challenges that Israel faces on a regular basis.
It is a distraction. So that's one consideration. The other thing that people understand is that the trial has social implications that aren't healthy to Israel's, situation of polarization. People understand that the trial is something that puts extra weight on the tense situation that we already have because of other reasons. So all this leads many Israelis to the conclusion that putting an end to the trial would be a good idea. The only question then becomes, well, under what conditions should we put an end to the trial? If we look at the numbers, I'd say that about 20% of the Israeli population, mostly people on the left or the center left, and many Arab Israelis, they will say, no, don't end the trial. Netanyahu must face the court, must face the law, must answer to the questions that were put before him. And these are the people who do not want to see this ending. The other 80% do want to see an end to the trial, but these 80% are split about half and half. Half of them say, well, let's put an end to it and go back to our routine politics. The other half would say, yes,
he has to pay a price, he has to step down, he can't continue.
There must be something that he gives in exchange to us.
And let me just ask this. The breakdown of that 80% is pretty much along party lines, correct? In other words,
exactly.
if I'm a Bibi voter and I'm a Bibi supporter and I vote Likud, then I just want the trial over. But if I'm a Bennett supporter or I'm a Yair Lapid supporter or Benny Gantz supporter, I want the trial to end. I want the pardon, but I want that quid pro quo. I want him to have to pay the personal price. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, and when it comes to the price, there are nuances. So some people would say, well, he at least has to admit some guilt, which he didn't do when he asked for pardon. And part of the legal question that we have, part of the legal question is because he didn't admit any guilt, and it's not clear that the president can pardon him without him admitting to at least something.
Right.
But okay. Yes, you're right. This goes along party lines.
So basically, what we do know, we know that that's how the Israeli people are divided. What we also know is that the prime minister himself has said, I'm not stepping down. I'm not leaving politics. I'm here to stay, which is not a big surprise for those of us who follow him very closely as we do. He was never planning to step down. And then I want to ask you guys in a bit, why did he now suddenly submit the pardon request? Because I think that's an interesting question. But before that, for a moment, Gil, you're of the opinion that the pardon is something that is worth giving even without the quid pro quo, even without the personal price, which, by the way, so am I, as a disclaimer. But explain your opinion first.
So I've moved from one part of the 40% to the other 40%. In 2017, when you were my boss at the Jerusalem Post, I think I was the first Israeli columnist to write this is going to kill us. Not that I have any gift of prophecy, but I know history. And I'd watched Bill Clinton when he was under pressure from the Monica Lewinsky investigation and scandal, just to turn on the institutions of the state, the judiciary system, and ultimately undermine the legitimacy of the Constitution and of our democracy in America. And so I said in 2017, I don't need to see Bibi in jail. Give him a pardon, let him leave politics, let him clear his name. Then, by the way, I didn't know this part, he could have come back after October 7th and been the hero to save us rather than the goat, but we'll put that aside. Since then, now he made this big appeal that he said, I want to get pardoned because we need to unite the nation. So first of all, it feels like the arsonist applying to be the fire chief, but we'll talk about that in group therapy later. I said, okay, I don't need to see him in jail. I'm still in that position. Give him a pardon, but let's, even before he gets the pardon, let's see him actually start uniting the nation. Let him have a proper investigation of October 7th. Let him start speaking to our Miluimnikim. Let him do a series of speeches all over the country about issues that people care about. What's the day after in terms of the war? What's the day after in terms of Gaza? What's the day after in terms of our Miluimnikim? What's the day after in terms of our society, our economy? Let him start undoing all the damage he's done with the whole institutionalization of Channel 14 and the hate machine. Now, that doesn't mean that the left also doesn't have work to do, but he is our prime minister and he has failed in that capacity. So I don't need to see him in jail. I don't need to. And then, because elections are coming soon, let's be democratic about it, lowercase d. Let's take the deal to the people and let's see if he actually can run again, and then let the people decide. And if the people decide they nevertheless want him after he got pardoned, that's not on me, that's not on Herzog, that's not on you, that's on the people.
It'd be interesting. I mean, one of the options that's been spoken about, definitely in the media, it's unclear, where Herzog specifically stands on this, is the possibility that maybe within the quid pro quo, there would be an agreement by the prime minister for the establishment of a state commission of inquiry. So not the commission of inquiry that they're trying to push through. You mentioned the arsonist becoming the police chief, or the fireman. What they want to do is, there as the suspect, they want to be able to go into the police department and say, no, you, I don't want to investigate me. You, I'll take you, right? They want to be able to select the people who are going to investigate, as opposed to doing a state independent commission of inquiry. That might be, that's definitely a value. I would personally want to definitely see something like that happen. I don't know if that will satisfy that 40% of the Israeli public who are adamantly opposed to a pardon without him paying a personal price. But I will just add one other thing, and this was my feeling about the pardon. You talked about the unity. I want to translate that for a moment into political terms. The way I look at it is that the moment you no longer have the trial, you no longer have a justification for the center-left parties, let's call them that, even though they're not all left and maybe they're not all center, but that group of the opposition parties, so the Benny Gantz party, the Yair Lapid party, the Lieberman party, the Bennett, the Gadi Eisenkot, the moment you don't have the trial, you no longer have justification for why they can't sit with Likud or why they can't sit with Bibi after the upcoming election. And we know the election's coming. It has to be held by October. It will likely be held earlier. And therefore, if I want to create a government that can actually govern, get done for the Israeli people what needs to get done, whether it's paying lip service to the Saudis so we can get Saudi normalization and talk about a peace process with the Palestinians, whether it's getting a draft law that can actually, well, we don't even need a draft law. Just draft the Haredim, right? You don't even need a special law. I mean, all these big issues that we need to get done, killing judicial reform, doing what's really right for the country, you can have that after a pardon. And if I look to the future, that's something of unity also. But that's what I would want to see. So I look at the trade-off and the price here, keeping the trial going, and it will take years, folks. This isn't going to end anytime soon. We're talking about just for the district court, another year or two, and then on the appeal that will almost likely definitely come by both sides, another several years. So we're looking at least 4-5 years potentially to the future. We could be done with this and we can have a government that can actually govern. So Shmuel,
Sorry, can I just say once to say there's an old expression in the U.S. justice delayed is justice denied. Now, I'm well aware of the fact that Bibi and his lawyers have extended it, but I have to say, as a private citizen, and we've seen this with Lieberman, we've seen this with so many political figures, you can't be under investigation and be a normal human being and live a normal life when you're under investigation for 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And I think if the judiciary hasn't been able to make it short and punchy, and it's ultimately on the responsibility of the judges, because they can also stop the defense attorneys, that also is part of the problem. So we have this kind of, if we have an opportunity to press a reset, because we have so many fundamentals that are misfiring in this trial, I'm okay with that.
So Shmuel, we've given you 2 reasons why a pardon might be the right thing for Israel. 1, let's try to get to unity. 2, the translated political benefit potential. How do you see it?
There might be good reasons to end the trial, but to see this as something that will have positive impact on Israel, you need to see at least some willingness on the part of Netanyahu to fulfill, 1 or 2 or 3 of the dreams you just shared with us. You want unity, you want official investigation of the war. You want a real draft law that will bring Haredis into the fold of military service. You want all this. Did you see any willingness on the part of Netanyahu to give an inch in return or in exchange?
No. If anything, it's the opposite. Correct.
It's the opposite. Right now, he's saying, well, I'm not quitting, I'm not leaving. I'm not stopping the judicial reform. He already said that. So what he put on the table is not a request for pardon. It was more of a threat. He said, give me a pardon or else. Or polarization will continue. We'll see more social strife in Israel. We are going to see more and more of what we've seen in the last 3 years. Give me pardon or we are all going to pay the price. Again, this might be, a position that the Prime Minister is taking as part of a process of negotiation with the President. He might say something else to the President in private when there is real conversation about the terms for pardon. But right now, I don't see a prime minister that is willing to turn the page and move back to days of less polarization and more accommodation on the part of his coalition. He's not saying, well, I'm willing to break my bond with the Haredi parties. He's not saying I'm willing to censor or tame my radical Minister of Justice. He's not saying, he's not walking around talking to soldiers and telling them we are all one people, let's unite, we are all going to...
We get the point. We get the point.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
No. But by the way, I mean...
we might end up giving him pardon and getting nothing in return.
Okay, but Herzog, so here's what I want to ask. Herzog, let's assume for a moment, the guy is sophisticated. He's a savvy politician. He's been around the block not once, not twice, numerous times with Netanyahu, who has also, like everyone else in the Knesset, he has, for lack of a better term, screwed him also in politics in the past, right? Famously, back in, I think it was May of 2016, when they held secret negotiations about establishing a unity government, Herzog was going to come into Bibi's government, and in the end, at the last minute, he brought in Avigdor Lieberman instead of what was known as the Zionist Union, the Machaneh Tzioni, the party that Herzog led at the time. So they know each other very, very, very well. I would assume, and I know that the two of you actually recently spent some time with President Herzog. For those who don't know what I'm referring to,
on a different.
Let me give you the plug. Shmuel and Gil interviewed President Herzog and his brother, the former ambassador of the United States, Mike Herzog, about ahead of the 50th anniversary to the speech that their father, President Chaim Herzog, famous speech that he gave as ambassador of Israel to the United Nations, where he ripped up what was it? The resolution declaring Zionism as
equating
racist.
Zionism and racism.
Right. So a different conversation, but you both know him. You spent time with him recently. I don't even know if this came up at all in the conversation. Obviously, you won't reveal to me or to us what it is that came up there that was private and not recorded. But what will Herzog do here? And I will assume that he knows what you just said, Shmuel, and he'll want to exact some sort of quid pro quo from Bibi before. So I'll give you the pardon on the condition that you 1, 2, 3.
Well, I'll begin by saying that Herzog knows that with Netanyahu there is no trust but verify type policy. It's just verify. You cannot trust Netanyahu to do anything, after to do anything after the fact that is not guaranteed by some clear mechanism. So what the president can do, he can offer all kinds of mechanisms that will, that will put some arrangements in place that bring about change. So, for example, a commission of inquiry is something he can say, look, you want a pardon? First establish a commission of inquiry, then you'll get the pardon. And then, after Netanyahu does that, after the coalition appoints or lets the Supreme Court appoint a commission of inquiry, this is a done deal. Netanyahu cannot go back on this and then cancel it. Or he can say, well, let's put together some legislation. That's one idea that is floating around. Let's put in some legislation that limits the term of the prime minister to just 2 terms, when the current term is considered the first term. So Netanyahu gets to serve another term if he wins an election, but this will be his last term.
Right.
Now, of course, such legislation can be later reversed, but then Herzog can say, okay, I put the mechanism in place that puts an end to the term of Netanyahu in 4 or 5 years. And, if the Knesset decides to reverse it, that's not up to me. That's for the people to decide. He will have to offer something that is not clear, that will not violate something that Netanyahu will clearly reject, such as, quit and get a pardon.
Right, that won't happen. It has to be somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in between, yeah.
Right. Gil, your sense of the wiggle room that the president has on this?
So, first of all, I want to say to Shmuel that my words were a challenge, not a prediction, right? And I think Yaakov, too, was saying this is what should be happening as opposed to what will happen. Let's talk about the elephant in the world, not the elephant in the room, Donald Trump. And I have to say that one of the things that kind of upsets me about this whole thing is that if Herzog gives the pardon, we will look like a banana republic. Because when Trump came to the Knesset, he basically said, give him a pardon, and then he pushed it. And so there is something kind of uncomfortable about that. And I think that actually does play in Herzog's mind. I think
By the way,
Herzog,
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but I want to say, the way that it was done in the Knesset made it seem, Trump is giving his speech and he says, oh, Mr. President, I have this idea. Why don't you give this guy, Bibi, a pardon? It made it seem like it was off the cuff. It wasn't in the text. I know from talking to people within the vicinity of the president on both sides, this was planned, this was coordinated. Herzog knew that Trump was going to make the comment. It wasn't something that was just off the cuff. Everybody knew that it was coming. So that just, keep going with what you were saying, but that just reinforces
No, and
your point.
look, it's funny. I have to say, with no inside information, I had a feeling that when Bibi sent the letter, that there was already kind of a fix-in. But I think the important thing to emphasize is that of all the people that you've mentioned, President Herzog really stands out as someone with a sense of the Ben-Gurion term of mamlachtiyut, of statesmanship. And I think he's really caught because he doesn't want to undermine the kind of legitimacy and the purity of the state. And if there's one person who really embodies those virtues right now, it's Herzog. And so it's very, very difficult. Both of you have, Trump pushing. You have Netanyahu pushing. But you also, I think, have many, many people just kind of desperate for this impasse to end and for us to go on to the important list of things that you enumerated and that I enumerated. So I won't be surprised if Herzog figures out a pardon. And I agree with Shmuel that having something like the It is verified by trust, right? Only the things that happened the day before the pardon will happen. Anything afterwards you cannot begin to believe will happen. But I do think that the country is so stuck in so many levels politically that, and again, with the looming elections, this could be a chance for a bit of a reset.
No, 100% a chance for a bit of recess. By the way, I mean, just you read Hebrew Twitter, the way people have been threatening the president. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, and I don't know this, but I would assume that in the Shin Bet, right, in the close protection unit, where it's known as Shvamot Shloshim 730, they have increased security of the president ever since this came out, because you just listen to the rhetoric in certain parts of the left that are saying to him, this will be a stain on your career. This is all you'll be remembered for. Nothing else will ever happen. I'm not even talking about terrible other stuff that's being said about him, but definitely the president knows, President Herzog I'm referring to, that that this will be what he will be remembered for. Whether he gives it or he doesn't give it, definitely if he gives it, it will be the first line of his Wikipedia page and pretty much the only line of relevance in his Wikipedia page. And therefore, that definitely has to be something that weighs on him because, I mean, I think all three of us share a very positive sentiment towards President Herzog. He is a man who obviously does care about the nation, cares about the Jewish people, cares about the state of Israel, but he also cares about his legacy. And that family name is something, and you guys just spent time talking to him about his father and and that legacy that he carries is one that is very important. But that leads me to go back for a moment.
Remember that part of this legacy is the decision, the decision. It was not only his decision, but the decision by his father, President Chaim Herzog, to grant, well, it's not a similar pardon, but to grant an exceptional pardon to some members of the Shin Bet in the mid 80s.
The famous 300 bus affair, correct? 300
bus affair. So an exception when it comes to pardons is also a Herzog legacy that he will have to consider as he moves forward with this decision.
We also have to point out the irony, the big decision of most presidents is what tie do I wear today and which group of Israelis or foreigners am I going to hug. And it's very rare that we've had a presidential decision that was going to be so portentous for the nation. And that's a blessing and a curse.
And this is one of the only real authorities and responsibilities that the president has, because most of what he does is ceremonial. Gil, you mentioned the elephant in the world, and you mentioned Donald Trump. And there's no question that Trump here plays a very important role. We saw him speak at the Knesset. We saw the letter that was hand-delivered to the president by a senior member of the administration just a couple weeks ago, again pressing the issue of the pardon. I would presume that in a couple of weeks later this month, when the Prime Minister goes to Washington for a sit-down with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, if the pardon has not yet been decided one way or the other, it will likely come up once again. Or if it has been decided, also one way or the other, President Trump will likely have something to say on the issue. A lot of people think that Donald Trump's interest here is he's helping out a friend. Bibi's his buddy, and he wants to help out his buddy. I have a different view, and then I want to hear what you both have to think. I think that Trump cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's Donald Trump, right? He doesn't care about Bibi, his buddy. So his interest in the pardon is primarily for two reasons. One, whenever there is the so-called deep state that he could point to that's out to get tough, strong leaders, that just reinforces the narrative of the deep state in America. There's a deep state in Israel, so he can point to that and say, hey, it's not just me, it's a global thing. We all got to fight together. That just helps his own personal political narrative. But there's another issue here, and maybe I'm giving way too much credit. I don't know. But I think that Trump wants for Israel to have a government that can potentially get done and help him make the deals that he wants to make in the Middle East, that can get him the Nobel Peace Prize, that can get him the enlargement and expansion of the Abraham Accords, and can get him the legacy that he wants as the deal maker and the peacemaker and the broker and all that, Right now, this government can't do that. He might know, and again, I might be giving too much credit, but he might know that a different government without Ben-Gvir and Smotrich could say publicly, we're committed to a peace process with the Palestinians. And then Saudi Arabia can normalize relations with the state of Israel. A different government could pull out of southern Syria and try to get to a security arrangement with Ahmed Ashara. In other words, a different government could potentially help him get done for himself what he wants. So Gil, let's start with you. You're the guy who brought up Donald Trump. Why does he care about this?
So I agree with your analysis. I would add two more things. First of all, his deep trauma that he was prosecuted, and he would say persecuted by the state repeatedly. And so to the extent that he can, we saw he just pardoned the drug-running president of Honduras when he's also going after drug runners, right? So he has this thing about the criminalization of politics, which, by the way, is an important principle to try to get out of, because we're stuck in this. We hate the guy or gal, and then we try to criminalize them. So I think the criminalization of politics is a piece, but I agree that he's very focused on legacy. His sledgehammer approach to leadership is also list making. What lists can how can he extend the list of what he's accomplished? And he thinks that an empowered Bibi would be a Bibi who can give him the next big list of things he wants in the Middle East, starting with the Saudi Arabian peace plan and the Abraham Accords.
Shmuel, why did Bibi bring this up now? Why now? He's had a long couple years that he could have asked for the pardon. Is it connected to the war coming to an end? Is it connected to the Haredi draft bill? He wants to distract attention away. Is it because he is nervous that maybe he'll actually get convicted? He sees the way the court case is going. Where did this suddenly come from? Because let's just remind people, for years he has said he will not ask for a pardon. For years he has said, I will see this trial till the end because I want to get acquitted and I want to show that this was a witch hunt. Something has changed for him.
I think it begins with the fact that there's no downside. As he looks at the situation and thinks about possible tactical moves that he can try prior to the next election, that's one thing that came up that has only upsides. Either he gets a pardon. In such case, he's off the hook, he's unhinged. He can promise President Trump that in such case he will be able to do this or that because he'll be, he will no longer be tied to his current coalition. He can say all kinds of things and can do all kinds of things as a result of getting a pardon. So that's one option. The other option is that he's denied a pardon, in which case he can even, go even more strongly against the judicial system, against the president, against the trial. So this,
by the way, if he's denied a pardon, in your opinion, it'll only increase his political support, or it will solidify it?
It will help him solidify political support. It will help him change the conversation. If now the conversation is about the war, it's about the Haredi draft, it's about things that are inconvenient for him to talk about prior to election day. These are not things that he wants to talk about. The war is not a good thing for him. He was in charge on October 7th. The Haredi draft is not a good topic for him. This is something on which he does not have the support of most of the country. When it comes to the judicial system and to the trial, etc., presenting himself as a victim of the deep state, this will give him fodder, at least within his own camp. It will solidify his camp. It will bring back some of the people who said, well, enough with Bibi. He's doing too much damage to the country. When they get angry about him not getting a pardon, this might bring them back into the fold of the coalition. So I think from his perspective, there was no downside to asking for a pardon. And yes, I think that he's somewhat concerned about the potential of him being convicted. Some media outlets, mostly media outlets supportive of the prime minister try to present the trial as something that Bibi is actually winning. That's not the case. At least on one of the...
At least in case 1000, which is the easier one.
Yeah, case 1000, he's not in a good position to win this case. And if convicted, we already saw a prime minister and a president going to jail in Israel. This is not something that Netanyahu can just ignore, something that could never happen in Israel. This could happen to him, and I think that's part of the reason for him to say, okay, let's see if now the time is ripe for me to present, to present such opportunity to a favorable president. Maybe it can work to my benefit.
By the way, just to remind people, case 1000, the one that he's more likely to be convicted of, is the one where he got the cigars and the champagnes and some other gifts. And the reason is just very simple. Dry Israeli law is very clear. Civil servants are not allowed to get gifts, full stop, let alone an industrial-sized mechanism of gifts that are constantly being given to someone like the prime minister. And that alone, by the way, even though it's the least severe charge in the charge sheet, it's what's called breach of trust, that is enough to get a jail sentence. And it's also enough, even if it's a suspended sentence, it is enough to get what we call the kalon, right, which is the what is it, perpetuity or pertitude or whatever the word is, moral something that you can't, as a result, be able to continue to serve in a political office. Gil,
moral turpitude.
Moral turpitude. Thank you.
That's a great word.
That's why we keep the professor with us. At the end of the day, what will happen here is, like we opened and said, this isn't just about the legal elements. This isn't just about the trial, and this isn't just about Netanyahu's legacy. This is about the future of the state of Israel. And I feel that to some extent. And I'm torn. I don't know what needs to happen here. But explain to us how you just, in conclusion, this moment for the Israeli people and for this country.
It's so painful because we've seen such amazing unity from our miluimnikim, from our soldiers, from our reservists. We've seen such amazing unity on the streets. And to have this constant tension with the prime minister is really heartbreaking. And that's why I had my challenge, not prediction, that Netanyahu really needs to flip things around. So the problem is that we have a politics, people used to say, people get the Knesset or the prime minister or the politicians they deserve. No, we're not getting the leadership we deserve. And so I think this whole messy, smelly story, because any way it ends, it smells, is a kind of contradistinction to what's going on in many ways in other parts of the country. And the goal of the politicians should be to kind of align things, and we're just seeing this massive misalignment. And this, I have to blame the left and the right. The constant protest, with the hostages, the inability to at least enjoy some of our victories is part of the problem, and it also gets down to leadership from the left and from the right.
Well, this is going to be a big one, and I think we'll have some clarity.
Let me add one.
Yes.
I'll give you my analysis of a best case scenario. This is not a political statement. It's an analytical statement. The best case scenario for Netanyahu pardon is the pardon he gets after losing an election. If he loses the next election, and there's no longer the issue of, okay, we deny the people the right to decide who's going to lead them. If he loses the next election, then the case for pardon is very strong. He lost an election, the public had its way, and now we can get rid of this obstacle and let Netanyahu off the hook and turn the page. Again, this is not a political statement. He might win the next election. The public might decide.
The problem with what you're saying, Shmuel, is he very well might win the next election. And if he doesn't have the pardon and he doesn't have the option to form the government with the opposition, because they won't go in with him as long as there's a pardon, at least that's what we assume right now, we could get another government like the one we have now, or we could just be dragged along from one election to the next, and Well, people say that will never happen again. Well, we all thought it could never happen to begin with, and it happened 4 or 5 times. So, I don't know. I think we all are still processing. All Israelis are trying to understand where this goes and what this does and how this will make the country a better place. But there's no doubt that we still face huge challenges. And, when we look at from the political polarization to judicial reform to the Haredi draft to this, and that's not even mentioning the security issues, the integration of the Israeli Arab community into Israel in a more thorough and comprehensive way. What this does to all of that is going to be fascinating in of itself. And I just want to say one other thing, because we need to do an episode. Because I mentioned deep state, Shmuel, you mentioned the deep state. We have to do an episode about the deep state because I believe, I actually wrote about this in a column the other day, I believe that if there is a deep state, it's Netanyahu's deep state because he's been here for so long. So these guys who keep on talking about the deep state, and it always comes from his supporters and his right wing, I mean, those are his people who he's referring to. That's for another time and another conversation. I want to thank you both. Shmuel, thank you so much for being with us. Gil, we got you in the airport. We're lucky we did in between your flights. So thank you so much for finding the time. And to all our viewers and listeners, we'll be back in another few days with another episode of the Jewish People's Podcast. You can always find us where podcasts can be found: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, website of Times of Israel. Give us a 5-star rating, share it with your friends and family or anyone else you might think might be interested. Love to hear back from you. Thank you very much.